It was a bright, sunny afternoon. The kind of day where you just want to sit back, relax, and enjoy something simple like a cup of coffee. That's exactly what Jake Miller was doing. He was inside a little cafe, sitting by the window, holding a warm mug in his hands. The coffee smelled good, and he liked watching the world go by outside. Jake wasn't a fancy guy. He didn't wear shiny shoes or talk loud to get attention. He was quiet, happy to just be there with his thoughts. Outside the cafe, Jake's truck was parked. It wasn't a big, shiny truck with fancy lights or loud music booming from it. No, it was old. The paint was scratched, and there were a few dents here and there. It looked like it had been through a lot, but it still worked fine. To Jake, it was perfect. It got him where he needed to go from point A to point B, and that's all he cared about. He didn't need anyone to think it was special, but someone did notice it, and that someone didn't like it one bit. Jake took a slow sip of his coffee. The cafe was cozy. The chairs were soft, and the windows let in lots of light. A few other people were there too, eating sandwiches or chatting quietly. No one paid much attention to Jake. He blended in, just another guy in a plaid shirt and jeans. He liked it that way. Being loud wasn't his thing. He didn't need everyone looking at him or clapping for him. He was happy just sitting there, minding his own business. But outside, trouble was brewing. Someone had spotted Jake's truck, and they didn't think it belonged there. This person wasn't just any random stranger. Oh no, this was someone who thought they were in charge, someone who thought they could boss people around and make big decisions. They saw Jake's beat-up truck and decided it was a problem, a big problem, and they were going to do something about it. But here's the thing, they had no idea who Jake really was. They didn't know what was coming. And that's where this story gets fun. Let me ask you something, okay? Have you ever had someone look at you or something you own and judge it right away? Maybe they thought your bike was too old, or your clothes weren't cool enough, or your backpack was too messy. They didn't even ask you about it. They just decided they didn't like it. Has that ever happened to you? I bet it has. It's not a good feeling, right? Well, that's what's about to happen to Jake. But don't worry, this story isn't just about someone being mean. It's about what happens next. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this. Jake didn't know it yet, but this sunny day was about to get a lot more exciting. He was still sipping his coffee, looking out the window, when he saw something move outside. It was a guy with a clipboard in his hand and a badge pinned to his shirt. The badge looked cheap, like something you'd buy at a toy store. But this guy didn't act like it was a toy. He acted like it gave him power. He walked right up to Jake's truck and started staring at it. His nose wrinkled up like he smelled something bad. He didn't like that truck one bit. Jake tilted his head a little, watching from inside. He wasn't worried yet. He figured maybe the guy was just looking around. People look at stuff all the time, right? No big deal. But then the guy started writing something on his clipboard. Scribble, scribble, scribble. Jake couldn't see what it was, but he could tell the guy was mad. His face was all scrunched up, and he kept shaking his head. What's his problem? Jake thought. He didn't get up or run outside. He just kept sipping his coffee, calm as could be. The cafe was still quiet. A lady at the next table was eating a muffin. A man by the door was reading a newspaper. No one else seemed to notice what was happening outside, but Jake did. He saw the guy with the clipboard walk around his truck, looking at it from every side. The guy even kicked one of the tires like he was testing it. Jake raised an eyebrow. Okay, that's weird, he thought, but he still didn't move. He wasn't the type to jump up and yell. He liked to watch and wait. Here's another thing about Jake. He wasn't just some random guy with a truck. He had a story, a good one. But no one in that cafe knew it. Not the lady with the muffin, not the man with the newspaper, not even the waitress pouring more coffee. Jake kept his story to himself. He didn't brag or show off. That's just how he was. But soon that story was going to come out. And when it did, everyone would be surprised, especially the guy with the clipboard. Let's talk about that guy for a second. He thought he was important. He thought his clipboard and his fake badge made him the boss. He didn't know Jake, didn't care about Jake, and definitely didn't think Jake mattered. To him, that old truck was just an eyesore, a piece of junk that didn't belong in his parking lot. Yep, he decided it was his parking lot, even though it was right outside a cafe where anyone could park. He didn't ask questions. He didn't check the rules. He just saw something he didn't like and decided to get rid of it. Jake watched as the guy pulled out a phone and started talking to someone. His voice was loud, even through the window. "Yeah, I've got a junker here," he said. "Old truck, total mess, I'm towing it. Towing it, Jake's truck." Now that got Jake's attention. He put his coffee down on the table and leaned forward a little. Towing meant taking his truck away. That wasn't cool. Jake didn't get mad easy, but he wasn't about to let someone just steal his ride. The guy outside didn't stop. He hung up the phone and started packing around the truck, looking proud of himself. He even smiled a little, like he'd just won a prize. "This'll teach M," he muttered. "Teach who? Jake? Teach him what?" Jake didn't even know this guy, but the guy didn't care. He had a plan and he was sticking to it. He thought he was so smart, so tough. He had no clue what was about to happen. Back inside, Jake stayed calm. He wasn't shaking or yelling. He just watched. That's what made Jake different. Most people might run outside and start arguing, not Jake. He was like a cat watching a mouse, quiet, patient, waiting for the right moment. And that moment was coming soon, very soon. So what do you think so far? Imagine you're Jake, sitting there with your coffee, watching some random guy mess with your stuff. Would you stay calm like him, or would you jump up and say something? Tell me in your head, or if you're reading this with a friend, talk about it. This story's just getting started and it's about to get wild. Jake's not who that guy thinks he is. And that truck, it's not just any truck. Stick with me because something big is coming, and it's going to turn everything upside down. The sun kept shining outside. The cafe stayed warm and cozy. Jake picked up his coffee again and took another sip. He wasn't scared. He wasn't mad. He was just ready. Ready for whatever came next. And trust me, what came next was something no one, not even you, could guess right now. The guy with the clipboard thought he was in control. He thought he was the big shot. But he was about to learn a lesson he'd never forget. Have you ever seen someone think they're the boss only to find out they're totally wrong? Maybe at school or with your friends or even at home. That's what's happening here. This guy outside had no idea who he was messing with. Jake wasn't loud or flashy, but he had something up his sleeve. Something awesome. And when it came out, everyone would be talking about it. So let's keep going. Picture Jake sitting there, cool as a cucumber. Picture that guy outside, acting like he owns the world. And get ready, because this sunny afternoon is about to turn into a day no one in that cafe will ever forget. What's Jake's secret? Why is he so calm? And what's going to happen to that truck? You'll find out soon. Keep reading, because this is where the fun really starts. The sunny afternoon was rolling along just fine until, bam, this guy came out of nowhere. He marched right up to the cafe window like he was the king of everything. He had a clipboard in one hand, scratching notes like it was super important. On his shirt, there was a badge pinned, a cheap one that looked like it came from a toy store. And his face, he had this big sneaky smirk like he thought he owned the whole place. Everyone inside the cafe could see him. He didn't care who was watching. He wanted to be loud and in charge. "Hey, buddy," he shouted, his voice so loud it bounced off the glass. "That junker truck out there, it's in my parking lot. I'm with the HOA and I'm towing it right now." His words were sharp, like he was trying to scare someone. He stood there, pointing at Jake's old truck, acting like it was the worst thing he'd ever seen. The truck wasn't shiny or new, sure, but it wasn't hurting anyone. It was just sitting there, minding its own business. But this guy, he didn't like it one bit. Inside the cafe, Jake didn't even jump. He didn't spill his coffee or look scared. Nope. He just sat there, calm as could be, and took another sip from his mug. The coffee was warm and he liked how it tasted. He watched the guy outside through the window, his eyes steady. Jake wasn't the kind of person to get all worked up over nothing. But this guy, let's call him Clipboard Carl, was acting like a big, bossy bully. He puffed out his chest, making himself look taller, and kept yelling like he was the most important person in town. "You've got 5 minutes to move that truck or it's gone," Carl snapped. He waved his clipboard around like it was a magic wand. He thought he could make things happen just by saying so. The people inside the cafe heard every word. A lady eating a sandwich looked up and rolled her eyes. A man by the door shook his head a little, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. They didn't like Carl's attitude either, but Carl didn't notice them. He didn't care what anyone thought. He was too busy acting like he ruled the world. Jake kept watching. He saw Carl stomp around outside, pointing at the truck and talking big. "This parking lot's mine," Carl said, even though it was just a regular spot outside a cafe. Anyone could park there. It wasn't his, but Carl didn't care about that. He thought his badge and his clipboard gave him power. He thought he could boss Jake around and take whatever he wanted. Oh boy, was he wrong, so wrong. The tension started to grow. You could feel it, even inside the cafe. It was like when you're waiting for something big to happen, but you don't know what it is yet. Carl kept shouting, his voice getting louder and meaner. "Move it, or I'll call my tow truck right now," he yelled. He pulled out his phone and waved it in the air like he was about to make a big call. He wanted everyone to see him, to think he was tough and important. But Jake didn't budge. He just sat there, sipping his coffee, cool as a breeze. The other people in the cafe started to whisper. "Who does this guy think he is?" the lady with the sandwich said quietly. "HOA, this isn't even a neighborhood," said the man by the door. They were right. HOA means Homeowners Association. It's for houses, not parking lots by a cafe. Carl was making stuff up, pretending he had a job he didn't really have, but he didn't care if it made sense. He just wanted to sound big and scary. He wanted Jake to jump up and run outside, begging him to stop. But Jake wasn't that kind of guy. Outside, Carl kept going. He walked up to Jake's truck and kicked the tire again, harder this time. Thump, the sound echoed a little. He smirked even more, like he'd just done something super cool. "This piece of junk doesn't belong here," he said, loud enough for Jake to hear through the window. "I'm doing everyone a favor by getting rid of it." He thought he was winning. He thought he was the hero of his own little story. But he didn't know the real story, the one Jake was part of. And that was his big mistake. Jake put his coffee down for a second and leaned forward in his chair. He wasn't mad yet, but he was paying attention now. Carl's words were rude. Calling his truck a junker and a piece of junk wasn't nice. Jake liked his truck. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. It got him to work, to the store, to wherever he needed to go. He didn't need some loud guy with a clipboard telling him it was trash. But Jake didn't yell back. He didn't even stand up. He just watched, waiting to see what Carl would do next. The air felt heavier now. Everyone in the cafe could tell something was up. Carl was pushing and pushing, acting like he could do whatever he wanted, but Jake wasn't giving in. That made Carl madder. He didn't like being ignored. "Hey," he shouted again, banging his fist on the cafe window. "You deaf or something?" I said, "Move it." The glass shook a little and the lady with the sandwich jumped in her seat. The man by the door put his newspaper down and frowned. Even they were getting annoyed now. But Carl, he didn't stop. He thought he had all the power. He thought Jake was just some quiet guy who wouldn't fight back. He thought he could scare Jake into doing what he wanted. 5 minutes, he yelled one more time, holding up 5 fingers like Jake couldn't count. Then it's gone. He turned back to the truck and started writing more stuff on his clipboard, muttering to himself. He was so sure he was right, so sure he was in charge. What Carl didn't know, what he couldn't see, was that he was picking a fight with the wrong person. Jake wasn't just sitting there because he was scared or lazy. He was sitting there because he knew something Carl didn't, something big, something that was going to make Carl wish he'd never walked up to that window. The tension was building, like a rubber band stretching tighter and tighter. Soon it was going to snap. And when it did, Carl was in for a surprise he'd never forget. A clipboard Carl was outside now, acting like he owned the whole world. He strutted around, walking all big and proud with his little notepad in his hand. He started scribbling on it fast, like he was writing something super important, maybe a fake ticket or some silly note to make himself feel tough. His pen scratched loud enough that you could almost hear it through the cafe window. He wanted everyone to know he was doing something big, but Jake didn't care. He stayed calm, sitting in his chair, sipping his coffee. Every now and then he'd peek out the window, watching Carl make a fool of himself. Inside the cafe, things were starting to buzz a little. A few people couldn't help but talk about this weird guy. HOA, this isn't even a neighborhood. One lady muttered under her breath. She was the same lady eating a sandwich earlier. She shook her head, her eyes wide, like she couldn't believe what was happening. Another guy, the one with the newspaper, nodded a little, agreeing with her. "Yeah, what's this guy even talking about?" he whispered to no one special. They thought Carl was ridiculous. And they were right, but Carl didn't hear them. He didn't care. He was too busy outside, puffing out his chest and acting like a king. Carl kept going. He wasn't done yet, not even close. He grabbed a big, heavy chain from somewhere and marched over to Jake's truck. With a loud clank, he hooked it onto the bumper. He yanked it tight, like he was some big-shot tow truck driver who did this every day. "This junker's outta here," he said loud, smirking again. He thought he was so cool, pulling that chain and bossing around a truck that wasn't his. He didn't ask anyone if it was okay. He didn't check any rules. He just decided Jake's truck had to go, and that was that. Jake watched it all from inside. His face didn't change. He didn't frown or get mad. He just took another sip of his coffee, slow and easy. The warm mug felt nice in his hands. He glanced out the window again, seeing Carl tug on that chain like it was a game. Jake's truck rocked a little, but it didn't move much. Carl didn't notice that Jake wasn't scared. He didn't notice that Jake wasn't running outside to stop him. Carl was too busy playing his little king of the parking lot game to see what was really going on. But here's the thing Carl didn't notice, something big. Over in the corner of the cafe, there was a group of guys. They were sitting at a table, quiet as can be, sipping their own coffees. They weren't loud like Carl. They didn't wave clipboards or yell about trucks. They just sat there watching. Their hats were pulled down low over their eyes so you couldn't see their faces too good. And their jackets, they looked special. Not like regular jackets you wear to school or the park. These had little patches on them and they hung heavy like there was stuff in the pockets. They looked official, like they meant business. Jake knew who these guys were. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew. Every now and then he'd sneak a quick look at them, just a tiny glance, so fast you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. The guys didn't talk much. They didn't laugh or whisper like the other people in the cafe. They just sipped their coffee and kept their eyes on Carl. One of them even tipped his hat back a little, but not enough to show his whole face. They were waiting, watching, and Carl, he had no idea they were even there. Outside, Carl kept strutting around. He pulled on the chain again, grunting like it was hard work. "This'll show 'em," he said to himself, wiping his forehead like he was some big hero. He thought he was winning. He thought he was the smartest guy around. But every time he yanked that chain, he was getting closer to something he didn't expect. Something that was going to turn his big, loud day upside down. He was too busy playing king to see the real king sitting right inside. The lady with the sandwich leaned over to the man with the newspaper. "What's wrong with this guy?" she whispered. "He's acting like he owns the cafe." The man nodded again. "He's gonna get in trouble," he said quietly, folding his paper a little. They could feel it, something was building. Carl was pushing too hard and it wasn't going to end the way he thought. The air in the cafe felt funny now, like when you know a storm's coming but the sky's still clear. Jake stayed still. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He just watched Carl hook that chain and scribble on his notepad. Every move Carl made, Jake saw it. He saw the way Carl kicked the truck's tire again like it was trash. He saw the way Carl waved his fake badge around, pretending it meant something. Jake didn't laugh or get mad. He just kept sipping his coffee, calm as ever. But if you looked close, really close, you might see a tiny, tiny smile on his face. Just for a second. Like he knew something Carl didn't. The guys in the corner stayed quiet too. One of them put his coffee cup down real slow, like he didn't want to make a sound. Another one shifted in his seat, his jacket rustling a little. They weren't in a hurry. They didn't need to be. They were waiting for the right moment, and they knew it was coming soon. Carl was digging himself a hole, and they were just letting him keep digging. Deeper and deeper. Outside, Carl laughed to himself. 5 minutes are up, buddy," he yelled toward the window. He didn't even know if Jake could hear him, but he didn't care. He thought Jake was scared, hiding inside. He thought Jake was weak. "Time to say bye to this junker," he said, giving the chain one more big tug. The truck creaked, but it still didn't budge much. Carl didn't notice that either. He was too full of himself, too busy being loud and proud. The whispers in the cafe got a little louder. "He's crazy," the sandwich lady said, shaking her head. "Who's gonna stop him?" the newspaper man asked, looking around. They didn't know what was coming, but they could tell Carl was asking for trouble. And trouble was sitting right there at that corner table, sipping coffee and waiting. Jake leaned back in his chair. He didn't need to rush. He didn't need to yell. He just watched Carl play his game, knowing it wouldn't last much longer. The guys in the corner, they were part of Jake's secret, a big secret, and Carl was about to find out what it was the hard way. The moment was here. Clipboard Carl was outside, pulling hard on the chain he'd hooked to Jake's truck. He yanked it tight, his face red from trying so hard. He thought he was winning. He thought he was the boss. But inside the cafe, something big was about to happen. Jake set his coffee cup down on the table. It made a little clink sound, and everyone inside stopped talking. The cafe went super quiet, like when you hold your breath waiting for something exciting. All eyes turned to Jake. Jake stood up slow and easy. He didn't rush or look scared. He just pushed his chair back and got to his feet. His hands went into his pockets like he was taking a walk in the park. He didn't say anything yet, just walked toward the door. The lady with the sandwich froze with her food halfway to her mouth. The man with the newspaper dropped it on the table, staring. Everyone could feel it. Something was coming, something huge. Jake pushed the cafe door open and stepped outside. The sun was still shining, bright and warm. He looked at Carl, who was still tugging on that chain like it was a tug-of-war game. Jake's voice was calm when he spoke. "You sure you want to do that, pal?" he said. His words were simple, but they had a little edge, like a warning. Carl didn't get it, though. He didn't stop. Instead, he laughed. A loud, annoying laugh that echoed across the parking lot. "Too late, tough guy," Carl shouted back. "This truck's mine now." He puffed out his chest, thinking he'd won. Oh, how wrong he was. Carl gave the chain one more big pull, grinning like he'd just scored a goal. He thought Jake was just some quiet guy who couldn't stop him. He thought he was the king of the parking lot. But then creak, the cafe door swung open again. Out came the guys from the corner table, all 6 of them. They didn't run or yell. They just walked out, steady and strong, like a team ready for action. The sun hit their jackets and something shiny caught everyone's eye. Badges, real ones, not fake like Carl's. They gleamed on their belts, sparkling in the light. Radios crackled on their hips, making little buzzing sounds. These guys weren't just random coffee drinkers. They were something more. One of the guys stepped forward. He was tall, with a hat pulled low over his eyes. He tipped it back slow, and there it was, a sheriff's star pinned to his chest. It shone like gold, big and bold. His voice came out low but firm, like a teacher telling you to sit down. "Step away from the truck," he said to Carl. His words weren't loud, but they hit hard. Everyone heard them. Carl stopped yanking the chain. His hands froze on it, and his mouth fell open. His jaw dropped so fast you'd think it smacked the pavement. His big, proud smirk was gone just like that. The other 5 guys spread out a little, standing behind the sheriff. Their badges winked in the sunlight too. They didn't smile or laugh. They just stood there, watching Carl like hawks. Inside the cafe, the lady with the sandwich gasped. The man with the newspaper leaned forward in his chair. Even the waitress peeked out from behind the counter, her eyes wide. No one could believe what they were seeing. Carl's big moment was falling apart right in front of everyone. Jake stepped closer to Carl, still calm as ever. He had a little grin on his face now, not a mean one, just a quiet one, like he'd been waiting for this. "See," Jake said, nodding toward the truck, "that's my truck, and these fellas," he pointed at the 6 guys with badges. "They're my buddies from the sheriff's office. We were just having a quick coffee break until you showed up." His voice was soft, but it landed like a punch. Carl's eyes got huge. He looked at Jake, then at the sheriff, then at the other guys. His brain was spinning, trying to figure out what just happened. The sheriff crossed his arms, staring at Carl. "You heard him," he said. "That's Jake's truck, and you're not towing anything today." His radio crackled again, and he tapped it with one finger like he was ready to call more people if he had to. The other deputies, those were the sheriff's helpers, stood tall, their hands on their belts. They didn't need to say much, just standing there was enough. Carl started to shake a little. His clipboard slipped in his hand and he almost dropped it. Carl's loud laugh was gone now. His big talk was gone too. He looked like a kid who just got caught sneaking candy. I didn't know," he stammered. His voice was squeaky, not tough anymore. He let go of the chain and it clanked to the ground. He took a step back, then another, his eyes darting around. He didn't know what to do. He'd been so sure he was in charge, so sure he could take Jake's truck and look cool doing it. But now he looked silly. Really, really silly. Jake didn't yell or get mad. He just stood there, hands still in his pockets, watching Carl fall apart. The sheriff tipped his hat a little more, showing his serious face. "You got a badge?" he asked Carl. Carl fumbled with the cheap pin on his shirt. Yeah, it's my HOA badge," he said, holding it up like it would save him. The sheriff squinted at it. "That's not real," he said flat. "You're not HOA, you're just making trouble." The other deputies nodded, and one of them even chuckled a little. Inside the cafe, people started whispering again. "He's with the sheriff," the sandwich lady said, her mouth full of food. "Those guys are cops?" the newspaper man asked, pointing outside. The waitress smiled for the first time all day. Everyone was buzzing now. Jake wasn't just some quiet guy with a beat-up truck. He was friends with the sheriff's team, and they'd been sitting there the whole time, watching Carl act like a big shot. What a surprise. Carl's face turned red, super red, like a tomato. He dropped his clipboard and it hit the ground with a thud. He didn't know where to look. He'd been so loud, so bossy, and now he was the one in trouble. Jake's little grin got a tiny bit bigger. "Next time," he said to Carl, "maybe ask before you start towing stuff." His voice was still calm, but it had a kick to it now. Carl didn't say anything back. He couldn't. He just stood there looking small and lost. The sheriff stepped closer to Carl. "You're done here," he said. "Unhook that chain and go." His voice was like a wall, no arguing allowed. Carl bent down fast, fumbling with the chain. His hands shook as he pulled it off Jake's truck. The deputies watched every move, making sure he didn't try anything sneaky. The big reveal was over, and Carl's king of the parking lot dream was smashed to bits. Jake turned back toward the cafe, still cool and quiet. The sheriff gave him a nod, like a secret signal between friends. The deputies started to walk back inside too. The show was done and Carl was left standing there all alone with nothing but his fake badge and a chain he couldn't use. Clipboard Carl was in big trouble now. His face turned red, redder than a stop sign on a busy street. He couldn't stand still. His hands shook and his voice got all squeaky, like a mouse caught in a trap. I didn't know," he said, stumbling over his words. "I'm just doing my job." He held up his clipboard like it could save him, but it didn't. He sounded scared, not tough anymore. The big, loud Carl was gone, and all that was left was a shaky guy who didn't know what to do. The sheriff didn't buy it. He crossed his arms over his chest and stared at Carl with a serious face. HOA doesn't cover parking lots, genius, he said. His voice was calm but strong, like he was teaching Carl a lesson. And that badge, he pointed at the cheap pin on Carl's shirt, looks like something you printed at home. The sheriff didn't laugh, but the deputies, his helpers, did. They chuckled a little, shaking their heads. They knew Carl was full of hot air. His badge wasn't real, and his big talk was just noise. The deputies moved fast. They walked over to Jake's truck and started unhooking the chain Carl had put on it. Clank, clank, it fell to the ground in a heap. They didn't even look at Carl while they worked. They just pulled the chain off, easy as pie, and stepped back. Jake's truck was free again, safe from Carl's silly plan. Carl just stood there, holding his useless clipboard. His hands dropped to his sides and his shoulders slumped. He looked small now, like a kid who lost a game he thought he'd win. Jake didn't need to say much. He didn't yell or brag. He just walked over to his truck, calm as ever. His boots crunched on the pavement and the sun shone on his old, scratched-up truck. He climbed inside, shutting the door with a soft thud. Before he started the engine, he looked out the window and gave a little nod to his crew, the sheriff and the deputies. It was like a secret thank you between friends. They nodded back, all quiet and cool. They didn't need words. They were a team, and they'd just taken care of business. Carl didn't stick around long. He slinked off, walking away slow and sneaky, like he didn't want anyone to see him. His head was down and his clipboard dangled in his hand. He probably hoped everyone would forget his big flop. He'd come in so loud, so sure he was the boss, but now he was leaving with nothing. No truck, no power, no respect, just a fake badge and a red face. The parking lot got quiet again as he disappeared around the corner, out of sight and out of luck. Inside the cafe, everything changed. The customers didn't just sit there anymore, they clapped. Their hands came together, making a loud, happy sound that filled the room. "Way to go," the lady with the sandwich shouted, smiling big. "That guy deserved it." The man with the newspaper cheered, clapping even harder. The waitress peeked out from behind the counter and joined in too. Everyone was excited, like they'd just watched a superhero movie. And Jake, he wasn't just some quiet guy anymore. He was the hero of the day. The clapping went on for a bit. People stood up from their chairs, looking out the window at Jake in his truck. "He showed that bully," the sandwich lady said, laughing. "Yeah, and his friends are cops," the newspaper man added, pointing at the deputies walking back inside. The cafe buzzed with chatter. Everyone was talking about what just happened. They couldn't believe it. Jake, the guy who'd been so quiet, had turned the tables on Carl. And his buddies from the sheriff's office made it even better. Jake started his truck. The engine rumbled low and steady. He didn't wave or smile big, he didn't need to. He just pulled out of the parking spot, nice and slow, and drove off down the road. The sun glinted off his truck as he went, making it look a little shinier than before. The deputies watched him go, then turned back to the cafe. They walked inside, their boots tapping on the floor, and sat down at their corner table again. Their coffee cups were still there, waiting for them. They picked them up and took a sip like nothing crazy had happened, but everyone knew it had. The lady with the sandwich couldn't stop talking. "Did you see that guy, face?" she said to the man next to her. "He went from big and loud to tiny and scared." The newspaper man nodded. "Serves him right," he said. "You don't mess with someone's truck like that, especially not Jake." They laughed together, still buzzing from the excitement. The waitress brought over a fresh pot of coffee and poured some for the deputies. "You guys are awesome," she said with a grin. One of the deputies tipped his hat to her. Just doing our job, he said, and they all chuckled again. Justice was served, and it felt good. Carl had come in acting like he could do whatever he wanted. He'd yelled, bossed people around, and tried to take Jake's truck, but he didn't win, not even close. Jake and his friends showed him he wasn't the boss, not here, not today. The fake badge and the clipboard didn't mean a thing when real badges showed up. Carl's big plan fell apart, and he had to walk away with nothing but a lesson he wouldn't forget. The cafe settled down a little, but the happy feeling stayed. People went back to their sandwiches and newspapers, but they kept smiling. Every now and then someone would look out the window where Jake's truck had been. That was wild, the sandwich lady said one more time, shaking her head. Yeah, the newspaper man agreed, wild and awesome. They'd all seen something special, a quiet guy standing up to a bully with a little help from his friends, and it worked out just right. The deputies finished their coffee, chatting quietly at their table. They didn't need to say much either. They'd helped Jake, and that was enough. The sheriff leaned back in his chair, looking out the window. "Think that guy'll try that again?" he asked his team. One of the deputies laughed. "Not if he's smart," he said. They all grinned, knowing Carl wouldn't be back anytime soon. He'd learned his lesson the hard way. Outside, the parking lot was peaceful again. No chains, no yelling, no fake kings, just a sunny day and a spot where Jake's truck used to be. Inside, the clapping had stopped, but the good vibes didn't. Jake was gone, but everyone knew who he was now, not just a quiet guy but a hero. And Carl, he was just a memory, a silly red-faced memory who didn't know who he was messing with. Okay, let's wrap this up with something cool to think about. Here's the big lesson from Jake's story. Sometimes the loudest guy in the room isn't the strongest. Think about it. Clipboard Carl was yelling and acting big, like he was the toughest person around. But he was just loud. And Jake, he was super quiet, sipping his coffee, not making a fuss. But guess what? He had the real power. He didn't need to shout or show off. The quiet ones can surprise you. They might have a whole team behind them ready to step in when it's time. That's what happened with Jake. He didn't fight or argue. He just let the truth come out. His buddies from the sheriff's office showed up, and that was that. Carl didn't know what hit him. So next time someone tries to push you around, like a bully at school or someone being mean, remember Jake, you don't have to be loud to win. Sometimes staying calm and letting the truth talk for you is the best way. It worked for Jake, and it can work for you too. What do you think about that, friends? Have you ever seen someone loud get put in their place? Maybe a kid at recess who thought they were the boss, but then someone quieter stood up to them. Or maybe you've been like Jake, staying cool when someone tried to mess with you. I'd love to hear your stories. Drop them in the comments below. I bet you've got some good ones. It's fun to share and see how we're all a little like Jake sometimes. Oh, and if you liked this story, give it a thumbs up. It's awesome to know you enjoyed it. Jake's tale is all about being strong in your own way, and I hope it made you smile. Stick around, there's more fun stuff coming your way next time. See you soon, and keep being your amazing self.